Alright, and then if you want to, you can snap those Bezier handles together as well. So let's say that's looking pretty much how I want it to look there. Then I can now go back and adjust the skateboard layer, and I can put the wheels in the symbol. So if let me just color this guy red. So if I create now skateboard, now if I create a symbol out of my skateboard, and I do that same thing where I edit my skateboard, kind of like what I was doing a second ago with the torso, and I bring a wheel in. What's nice about this is that you can just kind of reposition that wheel or those wheels where you want them to be, but because they're all originally the same symbol, you can go back and adjust those wheels all together. So if I wanted to make a change, let's just position these first. So let me drag one more wheel in here. Alright. Okay, so now I've got all my wheels in there, but if I decided I wanted to make a change to something, then all I would have to do is edit my original wheel symbol. And even if I want to do something like I want to add something new to it, maybe I want to add some, I don't know, specs on it. If I go back and take a look at what my skateboard looks like, if I go in there, you see that those ticks that I added are added to all three of those, or all four of those wheels. So, I mean, to me, that's the only reason that I think you would want to use a symbol. Also, if you want to put some animation on one of those wheels and have the animation follow with all of the other wheels, this is a good case scenario for using a symbol. I would not recommend, now of course if I want to reuse that, I can get rid of the original and I can bring in my skateboard, and now I can animate the entire position of the skateboard over time. So that's pretty useful. I would never want to use symbols when I'm using a character rig on any element that I want to animate. For example, you know, if I want to do a face rig, I would not recommend putting all the facial features inside of a symbol on the head, because then whenever you want to animate those facial features, you'll have to go inside the symbol to animate them, and that just slows you down. Sometimes something that can be useful is putting a patch together with the original arm layer, but even in that case, I don't really prefer to do it that way. There are other ways of doing it. If you're working with Animate, it's useful to do it that way. But if you're working with Animate Pro or Harmony, then you know there are other ways of disabling layers. So, you know, if I had a patch on one of these layers, like there is, in this case we're using an effect to take the color art from one and lay it over top of the other. But if I wasn't using an effect there, if I was just using like a simple drawing layer that was a patch, on any one of these drawing layers, let's just say for example that this is my patch, I could go inside the layer properties of that one and I can actually turn off animate using animation tools. And when you do that, you just won't be able to animate that layer. So that's a good option to do when you want to have something that you don't accidentally animate. I'd recommend going with that option instead. So, I mean, that's all I wanted to say about symbols this week. I think that some people, when they start coming into working in Animate or Animate Pro or Harmony, then they try to initially start out by creating symbols for everything just like you would in Flash. And I think it's not going to be to your advantage to do it that way. This way, if I have everything on my main timeline, even if I want to add a new drawing, it's really easy for me to add a new drawing. Let's take one of these facial features. Let's take the eye, and I'll just search for it down here. If I want to create a new drawing for that eye, I can turn on my timeline view toolbar, which I like to use because it's easy and visual, and I can duplicate the drawing, or I can create an empty drawing. So I can create an empty drawing on that one. And now I can draw my new eye right here, and I can even turn on my onion skin if I want to see the previous eye. And maybe I want to grab the color off of that eye. So, you know, if I want to create a new eye, and maybe this eye is just going to be a winked version of the previous one, then I can do that directly in here without having to go back and enter the symbol. So hopefully you guys see why that's a better way of working, to have everything on the main timeline. If you do want to have this character then accessed as a character that you can use in other scene files, then instead of creating a symbol out of the character, what you want to do is you want to create a template out of the character. And I went into how to create a template in some of the other tip of the week tutorial videos. There's the concept of an action template, which saves only keyframes and drawings. And then there's the concept of saving a master template, which is what you want to save when you save your entire character. So then I would recommend going back and taking a look at that video for creating templates. Now, if there is a case in which you do want to use a symbol, let me go back and bring that skateboard back in so that I can just go over this other concept really briefly here. Let's say I've got my skateboard here, and you'll notice that it does have a pivot point, and that pivot point is in the center of the skateboard. You might be wondering, where does it get that pivot point from? And if we edit the symbol and go inside the symbol, do you see that there are these crosshairs in the center there? Those crosshairs indicate the position of the pivot point for the symbol. And the way that it knows where to put the pivot point is it will take the pivot point from one of the drawing layers in here, and it will promote that to use it as a pivot point in the scene. So for example, if I take the pivot point of my skateboard layer, I can set it to be anywhere. I can set it to be in the back here. And when I go to my tool properties, then there's an option here, not this one, but the next one over, copy pivot to parent symbol. And when I click on this option, you'll see those crosshairs update to the current position of this symbol here. And the reason that you have to do this is because, I mean, this is a good example. I might have multiple drawing layers within one symbol. And if you have many different drawing layers within a symbol, it needs to know which drawing layer is the one to pay attention to in order to take the pivot from that layer. So that's why you have to have one layer that designates what the what the pivot is. And then if I go back out and exit and go back to my main scene and check out my skateboard, you'll see now it's going to animate with the pivot point in the position that I set within the symbol. So, it's just important to understand where the symbol pivot comes from. And apart from that, I don't recommend using symbols really on things like characters. It's useful for anything where you have a cycle. If you do have a cycle on it and you have some animation on it, so if you're bringing your symbol in from the timeline, you can hold down Control as you're doing so, and this is going to allow you to access the paste special options for this one. And if you do have a symbol that has some exposure and has some animation inside of it, then you want to select paste all frames of the symbol. And you can even here set a number of cycles if you want to. So in this case, I don't have any animation inside there. I've only got one drawing. But if you did have some animation, it would bring in the entire symbol with the animation. And that way you can have the whole animation exposed on your timeline here. And then if you did want to create a cycle out of it down here, you can do that too with your create cycle. So those are the main points to be aware of when you're working with symbols. Hopefully that cleared up some confusion. I really hope that, that you guys understand the uses and the difficulties of working with symbols. I think that the other thing to realize is that symbols are only local to the current scene. So if you create symbols in your symbol library here, which is this specific library at the top, these symbols will not be accessed from other scene files. If you do want to access it from other scene files, you need to create a template out of it, and then it will create those in that template. So good luck now with your understanding and use of symbols, and let me know if there's any questions. Thanks.